Goblins. You know them, you love them, you argue on the internet about them. And fairly recently, I triggered one such of those discussions with my video about monster children. A lot of comments, and I think going through them and discussing some of them could be fun. But before we start, an important clarity must be made because I don't think I made it clear enough in the original video. Fantasy is not consistent, and neither are goblins. This is important because evilness changes between settings. For contrast, may I present Goblin Slayer goblins. These are a strong embodiment of the grim dark style, and within the setting should be murdered immediately. And let's place them next to the Harry Potter goblins that do nothing fouler than run a bank, which I guess is a pretty evil action. And you know what? Let's also show Artemis Fowl goblins, which aren't evil, but have a feud with dwarfs that places them in conflict with the main characters. And they stand out a bit because they're more reptilian and can conjure fire. And I'm having fun. Let's also show off Pathfinder goblins, which are just another general fantasy race with kind of some of those goblinoid traits. Personally, I like my goblins evil, but stuff being redesigned is a feature of fantasy, and D&D comes with a lot of people redesigning a lot of things for thousands and thousands of games that are all running concurrently. So with that being made clear, let's start digging through comments on the nature of killing goblin children. Fantasy players concocting scenarios to justify genocide since 1979. This was a response to another comment, which I think the DM wanted them to be not evil with a player who thought they were, and that kind of conflict can suck. So all I'm going to say is, if they are evil, it is a justified genocide. As weird as that sounds. Next, we got this fellow. He basically said to not incorporate goblin children at all, which depending on your party could be a good point. Some people would rather not discuss or think about the matter. Personally, I like realism, and I think monster children are a part of that, and I've never had a problem with monster children in my campaigns. But this is by no means a bad take for someone to land upon. If I were playing with people who really don't like the idea of goblin children, I would ride around it. I forgot what it was from, but there was one version of goblins that had blood magic. So they are pillaging and killing people to get the blood to use the magic to make more spawn. And that works pretty well and can cut out the goblin children part entirely. I'm not showing all of them, but there were a lot of Goblin Slayer references going on. And this is a fun 1-2 punch of the only goblin is a dead goblin and let's make those goblins good. We also got this neat one where he uses goblin sparing as a means of fear factor, kind of a practicality thing. If we spare the women and the children, we can create fear among goblins who will no longer consider us a problem. And in a reply, he does say that this has backfired on him before, which is fun, and I'm glad he was willing to bring that up in the comment. I actually recall in this concept a book I read. I think it was called The Land or Chaos Seeds, I'm not sure which. It was more or less an isekai written in America, and the main character slaughtered several hundred goblins, and the smell of goblin blood sticks. So all goblins who saw him moving forward just kind of immediately knew it was fight or flight time. This fellow and one other I think brought up that D&D is not about moral philosophy, and I made a video spending quite a while discussing moral philosophy, and that is a fair criticism, but that is also why I generally favor evil goblins in active games, because the simplicity helps the games move along. But I do think it's just fun to talk about infinite combinations and concepts in fantasy worlds. This fellow says it's not a goblin child, it's a future enemy. I just felt like pointing out these aren't mutually exclusive concepts. But the real reason I'm including it is I really like this reply where the person's like, no, it's EXP. And the same fellow left their own comment that wasn't a reply, recounting how a DM shifted her perception of goblins, which I found quite amusing. It got me thinking about how one version of goblins might cement itself in your head above others, so unless you had a qualifier, this is the goblin you think about. For me, the goblin that cemented itself above all the others was from the Nintendo game, Miitopia. Take a look. And before you finish laughing, this was a 3DS game too. That elongated nose was like popping out of the screen unless you turn the slider down. So until a modifier is added, this is the first goblin I picture. You have to then say D&D goblin or Pathfinder goblin or whatever other goblin variety to get the specific goblin past that. This fellow made a Warhammer reference. So I took the liberty of finding a meme. If you think it's funny, hit the subscribe button down below. This fellow goes into detail about how life for these goblins would probably suck and presents the argument that the kill could be considered mercy, which is literal Dano's logic, and I don't think justifies a kill, but maybe y'all disagree. Tell me about it in the comments. This is a nice story, so I'm just gonna read it as it was written. In my group, we had to take care of a fiend couple. Turns out they just had a child, which was busy eating the corpse of a 12-year-old. So the child sees us, immediately imprints on two of the party member, which I realize using my telepathy that being a great old one warlock gives me, making killing him extremely awkward. So we decide to adopt it. We resurrect the 12-year-old, name the fiend Beowulf, and go on our merry way. Our cleric ends up baptizing it and using the ceremony spell, thus dedicating him to the service of his god of light, and changing his alignment from chaotic evil, as are most fiends, to lawful good. Our DM was really cool for allowing it. Now, fast forward a few sessions, due to some Feywild screwery, we end up basically traveling 8 years into the future without our beloved child. Worlds gone to dung, demons everywhere, ASMRs that haven't managed to solve anything and have arguably made things worse, the whole shebang. And lo and behold, our dear Beowulf, now an adult, fiends grow up quickly, became a hero to the people, smiting demons left and right with his divine theory. I'm so proud. And that was a really nice story. Also, when I time skipped in one of my campaigns, my sheep, because I was a shepherd, scattered into the town and became like India's cows. This man stops time. He gets to watch his cool ally grow up. This is another kill it argument, which again, I'm fine with, but I felt it was worth pointing out. He went for the reasoning of they're not human instead of they're evil or they cause harm. And I don't think that line of reasoning holds up if I were to talk about slaughtering elvish children. All I'm saying. This fellow kind of talks about how he likes Batman style, see if we can kill no one, which is for morality, that's great. And personally, I've never played in a game like that. What I did find odd was he quoted Sensu, the Art of War guy, and I don't think he understood the context of Sensu's statement that you should capture enemies. See, if I capture an enemy in the context of warfare, it means that other enemies, whenever feeling cowardly, knows that surrender does guarantee survival. Additionally, if I take over the land and treat the captured soldiers kindly, I can simulate them into my own army and I have the land. He also talks about how taking supplies from someone is more valuable because you don't just get supplies, you didn't have to make it and your enemy is deprived of it. Rest of the comments fine if you want to do a no murder run, that's cool. I just wanted to bring up the Art of War point specifically. I thought there was a lot of fun things to discuss here, and the main thing I wanted to do was try for a multi-cam setup. Thank you for your time. See y'all next week.